Hello and welcome to Within the Mist, a dark and shadowy place for cryptids, ghosts, and the paranormal. Today, I have a special guest, a digital creator, an artist, and a sculptor of some of the most amazing paranormal products, Mike Porter. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, I'm glad you can make it because before we start, I have to say it's been quite a hectic day. So you'll have to excuse me if I'm a little scatterbrained. Yeah, it seems Bigfoot was throwing a temper tantrum at his parents. I'm guessing that's why they call him a Sasquatch.
Right on.
And so we met at a conference where you had a table set up with some of your products, and they're very amazing that you've designed and constructed yourself. I kind of wanted to get an idea of how you got started as an artist to begin
Hmm.
with.
Sure. So when I was growing up, I was very sickly. I was in the hospital until I was 5 years old. And so I did nothing but just sort of lay in bed and read books, and that just kind of fueled my imagination. And because I was sickly, I was also not doing sports much. So I would lay around in the house just doodling. And at some point, it just caught the bug. Um, from a very early age, I wanted to be a scientist. And then I realized that there was a lot of like math involved in that. So I decided then I wanted to be an artist after I um, kind of made the deduction that math wasn't my strong suit, but doodling was. So
That's great. So how old were you at that time?
I would say probably about 7 or 8.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you started at a very young age, which I guess is pretty common for those who are artistically minded. They recognize that right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then so you were doing artwork all throughout high school and into college?
Yeah, it's funny in high school. So I worked for my father. My father had a lawn and tree service, and so I would work with him on the weekends and sometimes after school. And so there's many times that I would fall asleep in class. So again, I wasn't the best student, which is ironic considering my current profession. But I would fall asleep in class, and then uh, I got into working at the library, and I loved reading books, and I thought that was great. But they would have me do their bulletin boards every year, and so I would draw all these big pictures. We have massive bulletin boards, cork boards, and I would draw them with like markers and pastels, and then we would do like the laminating and all that stuff. So I did a lot of like creative stuff when I was in like high school in particular. I started getting less and less sick, so I was able to play sports and all that stuff. But that was one of the highlights is because I was like not doing well in class. Sometimes the librarians would come pull me out of class to actually do artwork, and the teachers would just let me go. They're like, "Well, he's not doing anything here, so go ahead." So I got really lucky. It was amazing that the teachers understood that I wasn't passionate about what I was studying. I was passionate enough to get a grade, but I wasn't really trying to um, be academically inclined at all because I was bored, and I would rather be doing something fantastic or like either drawing or painting or reading a book. And I had the I had the comprehension skills to learn everything. It's just that I didn't want to do it, you know. So
No, I totally understand. No, so you kept going. I mean, you hold the actual degrees in artwork. Is that correct?
yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. So I wanted to make games. I wanted to make video games, and of course, when I started, there was not a whole lot of people that were doing it. But here in the Dallas Fort Worth area where I'm from, there was a couple of companies. There was Terminal Reality, which made like Terminal Velocity and Hellbender and Monster Truck Madness and a bunch of different Microsoft products. And there was also 3D Realms, which made Duke Nukem, and there
Oh,
was and there was id who made Doom. So there was three amazing companies here, and in my mind I'm like, well, I'm not going to be ever be good enough to get to id because id's the standard. And I didn't know about Terminal Reality, and I contacted this company called 3D Realms who made Duke Nukem, and they had published Terminal Velocity. And what I said is I really loved how at the time where Doom came out, and it was a 2D, 3D game. It was 2.5D, I should say. So you could look up and down and all that stuff, but it was all flat images. But Terminal Velocity around that same time period came out with a fully 360 space shooter. So you would fly in space and go over terrain, and there were 3D models. So it was actually really pretty fantastic what they were able to accomplish back in the early 90s. The owner of the company and the main programmer is named Mark Randall, and he actually worked for Bruce Atwick and Associates, who made the very first flight simulator for Microsoft.
Okay.
Yeah. So I contacted 3D Realms, said, "Hey, I'd like the job," and they're like, "Well, we don't have any jobs." And I was like, "But I really love Terminal Velocity." And they're like, "Oh, well, then you need to talk to Terminal Reality. Those guys are looking for people." And so I contacted them and I said, "Hey, looking for a job as an artist." And they're like, "We don't have any positions as an artist. Can you do level design?" I said, "Absolutely, no problem." I didn't even know what it was.
I was going
But
to say, I have no idea what that is.
so like frantically, and this is back in the old dial-up days, right? So frantically like searching on the internet, the very limited internet, to try to figure out what a level designer was and what they did. And they just gave me a chance, and I was really lucky to do that. So that was 1995 when I
Okay.
started. And I did my very first game. I did a majority of the levels, and I also did 3D art, and that's how I got sort of started in the 3D art stuff. The degrees and all that stuff came much later, after I had been in the industry for 20 plus years. I kept getting laid off at various locations, and one of the times that I got laid off, I'm like, this is not a stable career. And so I moved from Seattle to New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand, to
Wow.
become a tutor on video game development at this company called Media Design School. And as a tutor, I didn't have to have a degree. As a matter of fact, I don't have a bachelor's degree. I went from high school to 20 plus years of game development experience, and then teaching. And then I helped build the first bachelor's program for New Zealand for video game development. And I had to have a master's degree in order to run the program. So what they did is they took my 20 plus years of industry experience and considered that recognized prior learning.
Okay.
And so the equivalency of a bachelor's degree. And then I went and did my MFA. So I have a Master of Fine Arts. I'm sorry, that was a long-winded answer
No,
to
that's
your
actually
question.
great because it's amazing that you've gone from doing bulletin boards to video games
Yeah,
to teaching
right.
to now doing artwork of the paranormal.
Yeah.
How did
Well,
you start, changing your artwork into that?
I've always drawn really weird stuff my entire life, so it's I've always been fascinated with the paranormal, and so I've always drawn things like Bigfoot and ghosts and creepy stuff my entire life. So that's not changed at all. I was as a matter of fact, even in New Zealand, I would sit on the bus. I lived about 2 hours away from work, and I would ride the bus into work, and it gave me a really good opportunity to just constantly draw. And I would sit on the bus and I would draw, and people would come to sit down next to me, and they'd see what I was drawing, and they would get up and walk away. So there's they're like, "Oop, I don't want to sit next to this creep." But it was just all like monsters and stuff, ripping things apart. And a huge influence for me was the old eerie and creepy and the magazines, and also heavy metal.
No.
Um, and so I was really fascinated by that stuff. But the um, the drawing of the strange has always been something that's been on my mind.
Okay. And then so when did you start gearing it towards more Bigfoot, Mothman type, actual recognized cryptids and so forth?
So I lived in the Pacific Northwest for a little bit. I worked at Microsoft. I think that was 2003, and I really tried to start doing some things then. I actually tried to set up my own website, and this is way before it was as big as it is now. And it was called Cryptolicious, and it was just like all these cryptid And some of my drawings I actually have used in my new website, but I did like a Vitruvian Bigfoot, like a Leonardo da Vinci version of a Bigfoot. Um,
That's with the arms and all the different
yeah,
positions and so forth. Okay.
that's from at least 2003.
Okay.
And I was using oh, I can't remember the name of the service. Hmm. It's been a while since I've used it, but there was a service that was prior to any of the newer ones where you could get your t-shirts done and sell
Oh,
them. I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry.
oh, that's
Um,
okay.
but I really didn't sell anything, and I started seeing my shirt design used
Ah,
elsewhere,
I
and I was
hate
just
when that
like,
happens.
yeah. So I just said, you know what? If somebody's going to steal it, they can come steal it off of my site. So rather than steal it off of somebody else's. So, but yeah, that's what I started doing. Is 2003. I tried to set up doing shirts and stuff like that. I didn't start sculpting until much more recently. Um,
So what kind of shirts were you doing then?
so it was like the Vitruvian Bigfoot.
Okay.
I had a alien skull, um, like an alien gray skull. I had a Thunderbird, had a Mothman. I don't know if I still have all of those. I can show you the original Bigfoot one. That might be. I'll just share my screen really quickly. Oh, it's disabled.
To keep you someone from stealing your artwork.
Ah, okay. Well, on my website there's the original Vitruvian Bigfoot one, and then that one is one of the original ones that I did for the Cryptolicious website. And again, I didn't sell much, so I decided to repurpose it now, and so I have some of those drawings. But again, it was all a Thunderbird, which is a the giant eagle-like creature flying over the top of the Cessna, which I believe is the very first. In Alaska, there was a guy that was talking about a Thunderbird that swooped his airplane that had a larger wingspan than his Cessna, and I thought that was a really interesting one. I've got a skunk ape drawing that I've done ages ago. So constantly trying to do those things.
Okay. And then, so then you went from the artwork on t-shirts and websites to
Mm-hmm.
actually sculpting 3D, you know, objects that you could actually hold on to.
Yeah, I originally started with this wax-based clay called Monster Clay, and so it's a really good workable clay that you can sculpt. But the problem was is that I would get really good detail, but because I wasn't as proficient at sculpting as I would like to have been, they tended to be very large size magnets, which makes the weight more heavy and more
Oh,
difficult. And so I don't know if I have. Maybe this is a better way to show you. Yeah, so this is one of my original um, sculptures, and you can see the size of it in my hand.
yeah. That's
And
amazing.
and I'll show you another one that I've recently done, which is
You weren't kidding. There's a lot of detail in those.
so this is my Mothman.
Okay.
So you can see sort of the size difference. I apologize
Hmm.
for the blurriness.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah.
And so the size difference, like, resin's expensive, silicone's expensive, the weight, these are still fairly heavy objects. And then so the magnets that you have to buy have to be really strong neodymium magnets. And so I had to downsize from those original hand sculpts, and that's why I started doing digital sculpting in a 3D program called ZBrush.
ZBrush. So, okay, for those of us who are not familiar with 3D printers and so forth,
Mhm.
how does that work? You do you draw it beforehand in
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I just it's really quick and easy for me to just grab a ball of clay, a digitally ball of clay, and sort of like pull out shapes until I see something that I'm excited about, and I'll start working through that. Um, so those go pretty quickly, but basically all you're doing is you're taking um, it's it's kind of technical, but basically it's a bunch of pixels that are in 3D space, and you're pushing and pulling them. You can think of it sort of like a voxel as a volumetric pixel. And so
Okay.
as you're sculpting these voxels, you're able to turn them around and look at them from all angles and get super fine detail in them. And then once you have that done, then you can output that as a stereolithographic file, which is basically just height data, like height generation, and then that goes into my 3D printer. So it takes that information and it slices it into a bunch of layers, like micro thin layers, and it'll UV cure resin in those micro layers and builds it up until it's a 3D object.
So how long does it take you to digitally sculpt an object? I mean,
Um,
and do you usually have an idea of what you're, I mean, do you go in and say, okay, today I'm going to create a Bigfoot, face?
no, no, I go, I'm going to sculpt. Oh, look, a Bigfoot face has emerged. Okay, well, and then we'll
Okay.
continue working on it, right? I just start pulling things around until I find something that inspires me. I know it's going to be a cryptid of some variety. I just don't know exactly which one yet. And so when I start doing it, like um, I do the same thing with large format sculptures. So I used to do, I had my own school for a little while where I was doing practical effects and makeup and all that stuff, miniatures and that sort of thing. And I was sculpting full size masks. And so I would just start throwing lumps of clay at the board until I started seeing some shapes, and then I would create a thing out of that. And it's sort of the same approach that I take when I start digitally sculpting.
Okay. So you have no idea what the finished product's going to look like until you're done.
Usually, yeah. I mean, there's times where I know that I wanted to do a Flatwoods monster.
Oh, okay.
Um, this is not a painted one, so if you'll have to forgive me, and it's not been cleaned up, but I knew the Flatwoods monster was going to need to
Oh, okay.
be
Yeah.
sort of, it's kind of hard to say,
With the spade shaped head.
with the spade shape, and then the painting would be very like the red face with the glowing yellow eyes, and
Right.
you know so I knew those things would be coming up. Specifically, I tried to cater to whatever sort of event I'm going to, like the one that we were at, the Dogman conference. I had a lot of dogmen that I was sculpting, and a lot of products like coasters and things of that nature that I do
Okay. So do you ever get frustrated with, the designs not, coming out the way you want them to?
all the time.
Okay.
There's been times I've scrapped it and started over. Like I'll stop and walk away from it, and then I'll come back to it and try again.
Um,
Yeah, I don't have a huge amount of time for this. Like I said earlier, I'm in education, and so I have like 5 days a week that I go into work to teach, but I also have a 4 hour drive a day, 2 hours there and 2 hours back because I live
ooh,
out in the country. So I have very little time. And so I usually do the sculpting and stuff on the weekends, but sometimes I wait until I know if there's an event coming up. And for some reason, working under pressure just like ignites the sparks that needs to, it's like the frantic, oh my gosh, I have to get this stuff done. And that seems to help with creativity. It's like under pressure,
oh,
which is really sort of the entirety of the game development experience. It's like we got 8 months to make a game and it has to be great. And you're like, okay, sure. You know,
well, how long does it take once you have a design made in the computer for your 3D printer to bring it to life?
so sometimes it's like 2 or 3 hours. It just depends. But you have to set it up to do specific amount of um, like UV baking. So in order to have a really strong base, it needs to set for so many seconds, like 30 seconds for that original thing. And then each layer is sort of like 5 to 10 seconds, but you're doing thousands of layers. And so it just takes a while. Um, like I said, some of them are 2 hours. I've had one that's been 6 hours. Um, but once the 3D print's done, then what I do, I don't sell the 3D prints. What I do is I clean them up, um, and then I make a silicone mold out of those, and then I use a two-part resin and create plastic magnets out of that. So I can show you a mold.
Yeah. And how many magnets or so forth do you make out of each mold then?
Um, Hundreds.
Unlimited?
Yeah, it's well, no, it'll break down after a while. So like 100,
Oh,
150.
okay.
But then I can just make a new mold. So this is a mold here for one of my creatures, and you can see it's like really stretchy.
Yeah.
And so what you do is you'll pour, and you can see it's pretty
Pretty thick.
thick. And then and I found a better way to do this, so I'm not wasting so much silicone. But so I'll do the silicone. That'll set, which is usually depends on what silicone I use. Sometimes it's 24 hours, sometimes it's 4 hours. So that has to set. And then there is a resin that's like a really fast resin. So that might be 10 to 20 minutes, or the one I have right now is like an hour. So each process takes a little bit of time. And then the cleanup on the magnets. So these are sort of like the unclean magnets, right? It's just got like a shiny back, and it's got some ridges on the edges and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so what I have to do is I have to um, I have to sand them down and then drill a hole and then glue a magnet in there.
Okay.
So there's prep afterwards, and then I hand paint each and every one of them. So they're
Is that the Loveland frog?
that's the Loveland frog.
Awesome.
So which I'm excited about because I've not sold any of these at any of the shows, but next June I'm going to Canton, Ohio. So
That's my hometown.
okay, I'm going to Monster Fest.
Oh, see, I really wanted to. The timing just didn't happen in time.
Yeah,
So I'm not gonna make it this year, but I'm definitely going next year.
that's great. Yeah, from what I understand, there's only 60 vendors that are allowed. And
Yeah,
so
it's small.
yeah, but I was lucky enough to get one of those. And it's a 5 day event, which I'm a little nervous about, to be
That's
honest
yeah,
with you.
it's a long time.
That's a long time.
See, I think that was the problem part is that yeah, it is such a long time. I couldn't get away for that long of a period. But
Yeah.
no, that's great that you're going to be there for that.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really like Ohio. I've never been to Canton, but I've been to Cincinnati and Columbus, and I really enjoyed Columbus. And I didn't stay long in Cincinnati at all, so I looked around a little bit, but I wasn't able to spend as much time there as I would have liked. I just went and spoke at a university, and then immediately drove down to Columbus after I did that. Um, the Idea Foundry there in Columbus is really interesting, and I was super excited to go take a look at that.
Okay.
I don't know if you know about that, but it's a giant maker space that used to be like a Ford uh,
Yes.
production plant. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, if Akron is where the Goodyear blimps are launched.
Oh,
So that's
awesome.
kind of neat to go and watch those take off as well.
That's great. Yeah, Ohio, and then of course lots of Bigfoot activity.
Hmm. Yeah, the only problem with it is I grew up there, but then I joined the military and all of my assignments were in warm climates. And so when I retired from the military, I was like, I can't go back to the snow.
Oh no.
So that's why I'm in Florida. But no,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Ohio. So yeah, it's great that you did that.
Yeah.
And the Loveland frog looks amazing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm probably going to do a few different varieties of what I try to do is capture a bunch of different varieties of Bigfoot. So I don't have, or do I? I don't. Um, what I try to do is capture multiple varieties. So like I'll have like a Yeti looking one, or a kind of a Harry and the Hendersons almost one. I have a Patty version of one, um,
Okay.
and Wood Booger. So anything that I do, I try to do multiple variations of. So there's something for everybody,
Okay.
because some people want scary stuff, some people want like friendly stuff.
Yeah. So where do you get your inspirations for the different types of cryptids?
So listening to podcasts has been huge, right? Because you hear everyone's sort of like firsthand accounts, and that's what really excites me about this is that you know each person has their own take on it, and they'll say like I think it's a primitive man, or I it looks like there's Native American blood, or they don't look anything like men, they look like monkeys, and then you're like that's a lot. That's a lot to take in, you know. So like some of them are super aggressive and some of them are helpful. I think there was one episode of a um, podcast that I was listening to where a guy fell out of a tree and broke his back, and there was a female Bigfoot came and nursed him back to health.
Wow. Yeah, I have to find that story. I never heard that one.
I'll tell you about where I heard it later, but it's
Okay.
it's interesting because there's the people that say they tried to kill them, and then there's people say they helped them get where they were supposed to go and
Right.
protected them from dogmen. You know, there's
Yeah, I mean, in Ohio, there's the Medina monster,
mm,
which was like a 12-foot version of the Sasquatch. And the big thing about it is that it's one of the best recording sounds of a Bigfoot from, so far away. So,
okay.
yeah,
And I think the podcast, like it's very compelling to hear someone's firsthand testimony, you know,
mhm.
and I think that's what really keeps things for me. Um, it keeps like I've stopped worrying about UFOs. I really don't care because the government said they already have them, and everybody knew that since the 40s, right? So it's just
True.
like, I'm just waiting for, I'm waiting for the revelation to come.
Right. For
you
one of
know,
them to come stand in front of a podium and introduce himself.
but they're still being very tight-lipped about the Bigfoot, which I think is interesting. So
Yeah.
like park rangers aren't supposed to talk about it, but they do, and so there's a lot of stuff like that. Military guys talk about like Fort Lewis and some other bases where they have a lot of activity, and the command is just like, you're not supposed to talk about that. So
Well, see, that's why I like the work that you do is because you're actually taking people who are describing their encounters and you're bringing them to life,
yeah,
which is
that,
kind of
I
hard
hope.
for some eyewitnesses to do. They know what they saw, they can tell you what they had, but maybe
Mhm.
they're not artistically inclined. So for them to recreate it, I mean, you did the Flatwoods Monster. If you ever saw the picture that the eyewitnesses drew of it, it's very simplistic and superficial. Whereas yours, you're showing more details and so forth. So it's
Yeah,
great that you're able to take, your artistic abilities and bring these more to life than the eyewitnesses can.
right. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that I would love to sit down with somebody, like I sat down with Tex, um, and he talked about his dogman encounter, and I was did some drawings for him, and it was sent it back and forth to him. He's like, "That's exactly what I saw." And he goes, "Brother, you just gave me chills." So hearing that, and of course, I didn't do I'm not saying it's an excellent drawing because it's like scribbling really fastly, but I was trying to capture the shapes and I was trying to capture the attitude. And he says it wasn't like snarling; it just had its mouth open, And those are like really important details. I think he was talked about the ears being really far back and how that was different from some accounts where they say they stick straight up, you know. And if you look at movies, there's a lot of people that say like this movie is more like a dog man than this movie. And so part of what I do as a game developer is I just consume pop culture because everything that you look at informs, decisions that you're making as you're doing art or as you're doing design work. And, like one of my favorite dogmens of all time were dog soldiers. The ones in that movie are
I
so
love that
good.
movie.
Excellent.
I actually made my wife watch it because she doesn't like werewolf movies because they're kind of
Yeah.
like all the same. I was like, no, this one's different.
Yeah. Like I like that one. I liked Howl. I don't know if you saw that
Yeah.
one. Howl was amazing. And so taking those sort of like what I do is like when somebody gives me a firsthand account or I listen to a firsthand account, I'm like going through a database of all the horror movies that I ever watched with Bigfoot or Dogman or whatever, werewolves. And I'm sort of like compiling a list of those things in my head, the features, and I can sort of like visually put them together. And that's how I approach it. Um, and then of course, as an artist, what I try to do as well is like um someone was saying, like they stared at me unblinking and there was no facial expression, but a lot of times people put a lot of facial expression in these things to try to make them look scary. But if that's
Yeah.
not what they're seeing, I don't want to do that. I do have one that's got sort of like the teeth bared and all that, but it's not like it's more like I'm just showing you my teeth. It's not like I'm going to bite you sort of look,
So it's a
right?
show of strength more than anything.
Right. And um I have this sort of because like I said, I do full size masks as well, and it's been a long time since I've done that, but I like working full size as well, and I would really love to go on some sort of Bigfoot show and sculpt a Bigfoot face on show, and then leave it out in the woods and see if they come out and touch it to get some fingerprints.
Did you ever see the show Face Off? It was
Yeah,
on the Sci-Fi Channel.
I used to
They
watch that all the
actually
time.
did a cryptid
Hmm.
week one time. So yeah, that kind of project that you're talking about would be very interesting.
I think it would be cool if there's a space that has like an active, you know, or a seemingly active area to have something like that where they can interact with it. Like if I don't know if you've seen the videos where they put a mirror out in the woods
Oh
and
yeah,
the bear and the gorilla just like absolutely lose it.
lose their mind. Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there would be something like that where they would not be happy with that representation, or if they would be,
Mhm.
or and
Would they
would
be
they
curious
destroy
or
it?
aggressive?
Yeah, I would love to find that out.
That would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
So okay, so now you're making your 3D sculptures,
Hmm.
and so you're going to events like the one in Ohio. How
Hmm.
many events do you attend?
um, I'm really bad about knowing when events are, and it's really hard because there's not like a
Yeah.
central location for that information, you know. I think I just got one recently, but it's still not comprehensive. And when you try to look for it online, there's not really anybody doing that. I did meet a couple, I think he's from Argentina, but he's compiling all of the events into a database. And so I'm going to hopefully get with them and see where they're at. But it has to sort of coincide with times that I have off, you know,
Yeah.
because again, I'm a professor, so like some semesters I only work 2 days, but most semesters I work 5 days a week.
Gotcha.
But you know, if I can skip out, and I usually only work half days. I usually work mornings because of the class that I'm teaching. And so if I can skip out on Friday and drive to that location with my stuff, then that's what I'll do. And I'll try to spend the weekend at that place and then drive back that night, Sunday night or Saturday night. If it's within driving distance, I'm happy to go do it.
So besides Monster Fest in Ohio, are you scheduled for any others upcoming?
So I just got through doing Falk and Jefferson events. So that's the Bigfoot events in Falk,
Right.
Arkansas and Jefferson, Texas, which is run by Craig Woolheater. Um, he also has like I think a UFO event that's coming up in Jefferson as well.
Hmm.
It's I don't know if you've ever been to Jefferson, Texas. It's an
No.
absolutely beautiful town. Um, and they have that's the Bigfoot capital of Texas, apparently, they're saying. So but there's events there, and then I've done some other events. I would like to go to I wish I lived like in the Northeast a little bit, or in the like Tennessee, Kentucky, because there's so many things around there, like in Pennsylvania and Virginia and West Virginia.
Oh yeah.
But that's just such a drive for me. Like Ohio is going to be 14 hours for me.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're having the Ocala Bigfoot conference is going to be here in June.
Yeah,
And so that's a close one for me. So we're definitely already signed up for that one.
that's great. And then I think there's another one that I'm looking at that I might be able to get to that is oh, where is that at? Yeah, I think Hanobi, in Oklahoma. Like
Okay.
if that's right. The um I don't know if I'm saying that right. Hanobia?
I'm
There's a
I'm not sure either.
there's a massive Bigfoot attack that happened.
Okay.
The raid on Hanobi or something like that. I wish I could remember. Hold on. Hanobi, Oklahoma, Honobia. So apparently there was this Honobia Bigfoot. There we go. Bigfoot Festival. So that is on 40 acres in Honobia, Oklahoma. and it looks like it's a pretty massive event. So I might try to do that because that would only be like a day, like 6 hour drive for me, depending on where it's at in Oklahoma. So
Gotcha. Well, you definitely have to make sure you're keeping me up to date so I can share all of your events on our social media
for
because
sure.
I want everyone to get, experience seeing your artwork up close.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's great being able to, um, like sometimes I do pretty well on the events, but sometimes I don't. But I always have a great time because people come up to talk to me, and we just discuss their, like what they've seen, or they ask me questions. And I had two like little events. I don't know that they're actually Bigfoot, but I felt like they were. So I'm not going to run around going that was a Sasquatch because I don't know. But um, when I worked up at Microsoft in Redmond, um, we were at this building called the Millennium Building, which is one of the Microsoft, which they own so many buildings there. But this one's over near a golf course, and then behind this building, there's a green belt, and at the green belt, they don't build any houses or any of that stuff. But there was a shooting range up there, and in the game industry, there's times where you call it crunch. They have a certain amount of stuff that has to get done at a certain time, and so many people work long massive hours. Like there's been times where I've worked 100-hour weeks. So it's been nuts. Um, so me and a friend of mine who is also from Texas um, were there. I hired him to come work with me. Um, we're standing in the parking lot at 2 a.m. He's smoking a cigarette. We're just talking before he heads home and I head home. And we hear this like really loud, like guttural howl. And
Mm,
it was like the Ohio howl, like forever. And we just kind of stared at each other. It's like, yep, it's time to go home because there was nobody else around. And it was like at night, that place is desolate, because
hmm.
it's just greenbelt and greenbelt on one side and golf course on the other with another greenbelt over that. So it was a lot of space. Um, and then the other thing happened, my wife was driving up I-5. We had just moved, we just driven up north of um, Seattle. I think we are going to Cape Deception or something like that. And she's driving, and it's like I-5 traffic is just crazy. It's like I-405, I-5, all the way from California up is just madness on the road because there's so many cars.
Mm.
And she's driving, and I'm looking over into this river on the side, and I couldn't tell you if it was like the Snohomish River, the Skycomish River, or whatever it was. But right in the middle of the river, there's this big black form, like trudging down the middle of the river, thigh high in water. And it's in the middle of November in Seattle.
That'd have been freezing.
That had been freezing, and that was pretty raging river there.
Okay.
And I think it's fairly deep as well. So that thing was big, and it was like walking against the current.
Yeah, and bears don't do that.
That not on two legs for
No.
sure. They'll swim.
Yeah, but so wow. So you had two different experiences.
Yeah. And I had a third experience that I kind of got laughed at. We were on Mount Stevens. No, there's like three or four mountains over there. Mount Stevens was one, Mount Adams. Anyway, I went up to the mountain with the family. We were walking around and we kept hearing this like, oh, oh, oh. And we're like, oh man, what is that? And my kids are freaking out. It's like, it's Bigfoot. And we get back to the ranger station. I was like, yeah, there was this noise up here and I did it. He goes, dude, that's a wood grouse. Like it's not
Really
big.
making that kind of a grunt?
It was like a oh.
Huh.
Apparently they make some sort of noise like that. Or he could have just been trying to
Yeah.
quell my fears.
Play it
But
off.
yeah. But it was freaky enough that we turned around and went back.
Don't blame you. So what does your wife and kids think of the work that you do?
Um uh she puts up with me. How about that?
Okay.
I mean, like she's happy that I'm doing something I enjoy, and I've invested a lot of time, money, and effort into it. So it's like it's not a cheap thing. Silicone's expensive, 3D printers expensive, laser engravers expensive. So
To create
um,
all these monsters, I'm sure she's thrilled.
yeah. What's interesting is none of it's hanging up in the house. So So you can see, I just really don't do art for myself,
Okay.
which is kind of weird.
All
I
right.
used
Well,
to.
okay. So you're selling your artwork at
Mhm.
these different conventions and so forth. But if you can't get to the conventions, do you have a website or a source where people can go to purchase some of your products?
I do. So my website is spelled incorrectly. I'll just say that up front. And so that's part of the problem why I think I don't get enough people to my website. However, it's Cryptid Curosities, Curosities. And yes, I know how to spell curiosities. But that website's parked and I don't want to spend $1,200 for an eye. So
Okay. Well,
so
I will make sure that I have a link to the website, even
yep,
spelling and all, on our show notes. So
right.
everyone will have an opportunity. Just click on the link and you don't even have to worry about spelling it. Just click on
That's
the
right.
link. It'll take you right there where you can see all of these sculptures and uh, curiosities that Mike has created.
Very cool.
So before we go, is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't touch on?
No, it was very nice meeting you at the event. It's always great to go around. It was such a cool place to see like legends in the Bigfoot world, like like oh shoot, now my brain stops working. Barton Nunley and um
Lyle and
Ron
Tex,
Moorhead, Lyle and Tex and Kim
David Weatherly.
Gerhard, all of them. And it's just like to be able to sit there with those guys and having people such as yourself that are interacting with people more on a day-to-day basis. I think that's cool. And to you know be invited on something like this is pretty humbling. So I appreciate it.
Oh no, I loved your artwork, so I want to make sure that I got a chance to find out more about it. So this was perfect for me.
Great. Thanks so
And
much.
I look forward to bumping into you at the next
Yeah,
conference.
man, I hope so. I hope we get another one.
Okay. For everyone else, this will be time to close up our Within the Mist podcast. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. Make sure you check out the website. And when you're looking at this different artwork, remain constantly curious. Goodbye, everybody.